Hey friends, so to figure out when to start your seeds, I recommend getting a calendar book like this. I like this one. It's got a nice month spreadsheet on each opening, each page, sort of. Yeah, okay. So first of all, you need to figure out your last frost date. So you need to go to a online reference, just Google your area and ask for last frost date averages, and then just write that down. So for us here, now we are in zone 2, and we're quite far north. We're I think at the close to the 58th latitude line in Canada here, in mainland Canada. So we're not close to the coast. We don't have that moderate weather. We have a nice cold winter. But we do have a bit of a pocket of climate here, and so what our average is, looked it up, and it says it'll be somewhere between the 1st and the 10th of June. That does occasionally happen, but generally I plan, and this is just based on experience, my experience and the experience of my forebears going back a couple of generations, they always believed to aim for about the 20th of May. So I usually just pick the Saturday in May that is closest to the 20th, or after the 20th. So this week it might be this 22nd, 23rd week, just before Victoria Day. We often do put our plants in then, but if we have a frost later, we just have to cover some things to protect them, or we might not put everything out in the garden then, but that's sort of the date that I start with. What you can do from there is you can work backwards. This is 1 week before the last frost date, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and so on. Flip the page here to April, then that'll be 4 weeks, 7, and I just go through and I just mark up each week, going backwards. That was 11, so 12, 13, 14. Now most things won't show you a on a seed packet, most things won't say longer than 12 weeks beforehand, but there are some things that I do start early. And for that, I reference both my own experience and the internet's wisdom. So this is my book from last year. I actually have books going all the way back to 2015. I haven't always kept great records, but one thing I do record is rainfall each month through the year, on each day that it falls, how the volume. And that can really help me to know whether it was a really wet year, whether it was a really dry year, was there a wet spell in spring, etc. And so I'll just write in here when I have started different seeds, and that also helps me to know when to start stuff. So last year I started my peppers the 2nd of March, which is quite a bit earlier than my tomatoes. And I did not find them to be too big, but I did find that they didn't transplant very well, and I think if I gave them better transplant protection, they would do better. All right, and then in June, I transplanted my pumpkins, direct seeded my pumpkins. I don't always write down exactly when I put everything in the garden, and because this past year I put things in so intermittently, I didn't make good records. I should have done better. All right, so if I go back to the beginning, peppers at the beginning, I started my onions on the 1st of February last year, and I found that they could have been bigger. I would have liked them to get a bit bigger and stronger before I put them out. So I am actually going to be doing it this year in January. The other things I start early, some ornamentals. Dichondra is a plant that I love that is definitely benefited by starting really early. Also dianthus, certain types of dianthus do well, started quite early. And delphiniums, these all needed a cold or cold wet vernalization or stratification, either in the fridge or in the freezer. And so I put these in wet baggies in the fridge and let them stratify. This year I'll be starting my onions early, and I don't think I'm going to start those ones, but I might start some alyssum, and I would be doing that soon as well, probably around the February 1st mark for alyssum. So this year, January, we are on we're on Tuesday. Onions and leeks. So I will make note of when I start stuff. That way next year I can look back at it and say that was a good time, I should do that again, or I can adjust it. So that's just a bit of a guide there. All right. I've got a list somewhere that I've made in the past, but I wanted to make a fresh one that's a little bit tidier. So what you need to do next is figure out when you want to start your stuff. So you might look at, say, cauliflower. And for most brassicas it'll be similar, but some might have a slight difference. So these are suggesting a 6 to 8 week ahead of last frost date for transplants. And I think it'll say that the Brussels sprouts don't say anything at all. Red Express cabbage. No details. Okay, so sometimes it'll say and sometimes it won't. But if you have a number of varieties of the same sort of thing, so broccoli 4 to 6 weeks, started in April, transplanted 4 to 6 weeks later, says both of these. So these are suggesting a 4 to 6 week. The cauliflower is suggesting 6 to 8 weeks. I'm going to go and look at what I did last year. I think I started them at the 4 weeks with cabbage and brassicas. Yeah. So I definitely think I could have started them earlier last year. I'm gonna go for the 8 week mark this year. So I'm just going to make it's February, end of February is the 12th. There, 10, 8, 6, 4, and 2. Now, most seed packages are going to give you a 2 week gap. So they're going to say 8 or 6 or 4 or 12 or 6 to 8. For some reason, planting on odd weekends doesn't seem up their alley. So I'm going to be planting my brassicas, or my first crop of brassicas, probably here. And then I might do a second sowing forgive my horrible writing. I apparently did not inherit my mother's beautiful handwriting gene. Right, so that's kind of how you figure it out, and you just go through all of the things you want to grow and look at the dates. So this one I have never grown before. It is called Mary Washington asparagus. I've never grown asparagus from seed, and there is no information on this packet. And none on the inside either. So what I'm going to do there is I will look it up. taking 3 weeks to germinate and slow to get going, should be sown indoors 12 to 14 weeks before the target seedling set out date. So that's a handy little, I'm not sure which way I'm going to put the screen here, but anyways, that's a handy little thing to do, so just Google it. All right, so they're saying 12 to 14. I am going to hedge my bets and say January 30th, asparagus. So go through, make your comprehensive list. If you want to see mine when it's done, please post a comment down below and I will show you what I've got. All right, so this is your first thing. So you find your last frost date and you work your way backwards to figure out your weeks in advance, and then you make your list of things you want to grow that and how early you want to grow them. I highly recommend keeping a record book, and a date book like this is super helpful to look back on easily and quickly and just see what you did in the past. And that helps you to have a good idea of what has been successful in your area as well. So that's all for this part of the garden planning. It's basically a plan to make records and to decide when to start your seeds. Hope this was helpful. Thanks for sticking around, and we'll see ya.